I'll do the Spanish that I have. You respond in the Spanish that you know. I don't know if this is the right Spanish or not. Cristo es resurrectado. No, I know it is the right Spanish because this was written by somebody who was a native. What is he? He's from Nicaragua.
Yeah.
So this is Nicaragua. Cristo es resurrectado. Okay, well, he has de veras escrito. You'll have to talk to Donos about
I defer to Donos.
Yes. Al Masih Ham. Christos a enviat. La Christe resuscité. Christus ist auferstanden. Sehr gut. Christos los pres. Christos los prese. Christos anesti. I think we're starting to get it down. Christ is risen. So if we preach Jesus Christ risen from the dead, then we preach Christ crucified. This is foolishness to the Greeks, says St. Paul. It's foolishness because it is neither philosophical nor is it scientific. It is not philosophical because philosophy conceives of reality primarily in terms of being. And life and death make no sense in those terms. Death makes no sense. And so victory over death is nonsensical. Life and death actually are accidental categories. They're not essential categories for being. But it's not scientific either. And if Jesus, because it's not according to the laws of nature. And if Jesus Christ is the root of the Christian faith, then the whole Christian faith is foolishness. Because the entire Christian faith is not according to the laws of nature. The body of Jesus, the root of the Christian faith, was conceived and born of a virgin. And that's not myth, that's fact. But science won't accept that. And the body of Jesus that was crucified, dead, and buried is not only risen from the dead, which is not according to nature, but he is completely healed of all the trauma from the cross. And the trauma of the cross had to be unimaginable. For a different reason, the Christian faith is a stumbling block to the Jews, says St. Paul. For one thing, if Jesus is the Son of God, it means that the Son of God has become a curse, as St. Paul writes. Because according to the law of Moses, everyone who hangs on a tree is cursed of God. So to believe in Jesus Christ, the Son of God, born of a virgin, crucified, dead, and buried, and risen from the dead, one must enter a completely different mind, a completely different vision, that sees even the laws of nature to be governed by the will of God, and that sees the law of Moses, which, by the way, is also the law of creation, and it's also the codification of the Abrahamic faith, to see that as but the shadow of a much deeper reality. And all the resurrection stories, every single one of them, are like so many gates that open onto this completely different vision of the world. One of my favorite resurrection stories is that of the disciple John coming into the empty tomb. He entered, it says, and when he saw the turban that was on his head and the linen cloth neatly folded and lying off to the side, he believed. Now understand, St. John Chrysostom points this out, that the linen cloth that was wrapped around his body was about 20-30 miles long. I'm exaggerating, but it's very, 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 very long. And for it to be neatly folded up in that space, short of the space of the time, is impossible. It would take at least a week to fold that linen cloth up neatly. So long was it. But take note of where the disciple sees and believes inside the empty tomb. He's inside the empty tomb. This is where he sees and believes. Dear faithful, neither philosophy nor science can enter the tomb, nor have they any interest for what's inside the tomb. For in the tomb, what is no more, and isn't worth knowing. Because, well, there's nothing to know. It doesn't exist. It has no being. And yet it is precisely in the tomb of the Lord that John saw and believed. The Gospel indicates the illumination that is beginning to dawn in the mind of St. John when he sees and believes, when it says, "For not yet did they know the Scriptures, that it was necessary for the Christ to rise from the dead." This reference to the Scriptures is in all of the resurrection stories. Note that in this we are not taken to philosophy or science to prove the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. If you will, we are taken out of the world. We're taken beyond all philosophical or scientific reasoning, as though we're being taken ourselves into the Lord's empty tomb. And that is where we find ourselves in the vision of Moses, the Psalms, and the prophets. Note that when the risen Lord comes to Cleopas and Luke on the road to Emmaus, note that he rebukes them. He rebukes them for the mindlessness and the slowness of their heart. The stupidity and the slowness, not of their mind, but of their heart, is what he's rebuking them for. As though there is no good excuse for not apprehending immediately, not in their mind, but in their heart, all that the prophets have spoken. Not all the logical reasonings of the philosophers, but all that the prophets have spoken. And then he begins from Moses and he proceeds through all the prophets to explain the meaning of all the things that the prophets have written about him. And when he comes into their home and breaks bread, well, this is the Holy Eucharist that is happening in the home of Cleopas and Luke. And the Holy Eucharist proclaims the Lord's death and resurrection. So it's as though Luke and Cleopas are in the empty tomb with the risen Lord. And that's when their eyes were opened. And Luke and Cleopas, it says, knew him. They knew him. They knew him. And immediately, it says, he vanished. It's very much like St. John in the empty tomb, where John believed in the risen Lord that he did not see. Cleopas and Luke saw the Lord, and then he vanished from their sight. And that's when they knew him. That's when they believed. After the Lord disappears from their sight in the Eucharistic breaking of the bread, they say to one another, "Did not our hearts burn within us as he was expounding the Scriptures to us?" Now listen to this, dear faithful. The Eucharistic meal of the Church takes us to Mount Sinai. That's where Moses and Aaron and the 70 elders of Israel, as it says in Exodus, saw the place where the God of Israel stood. And under his feet, something like sapphire slabs. Sapphire is a deep blue. Something like sapphire slabs, and the appearance of the firmament of heaven in its purity. And they ate and drank in the presence of the Lord. How can we, Christians, read this and not see the mystery of God the Son standing on the cross, and his mother, whose color is sapphire, and her womb is more spacious than the firmament of the heavens, standing at the foot of the Lord's cross? Now understand that the top of a mountain is like the tomb. And both the tomb and the mountain are images, the top of the mountain are images of the heart. In neither the mountain or the tomb can you go any further without leaving the earth and ascending into the heavens, or entering the other side to come into the place where the Lord stands. This explains why the hearts of Luke and Cleopas burned within them when the Lord was taking them through the Scriptures, as though Luke and Cleopas were Moses and Aaron, whom the Lord was leading up the mountain, and when they ate and drank in his presence, as though at the top of the mountain. They were mystically, truly, in the mystery of Mount Sinai and in the mystery of the empty tomb, the place where the Lord stands. They were in the invisible place of their heart. Now on Mount Sinai, God commands Moses to make the tabernacle in which the Lord will appear to Israel. And the word for tabernacle is skene. So this takes us to John 1:14. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And the word is enskenosis. You hear that word again? Skene. Skene. The Lord himself became the tabernacle. And in the tabernacle of his flesh, he dwelt among us. Moses is commanded to make the tabernacle, the skene, in which he will appear to Israel, together with all of its appointments and all of its rites of washings and sacrifices. He commands Moses to make them all exactly as he shows him to make them, according to a pattern, the heavenly pattern that God was showing Moses on the mountain. So that all of the worship of Israel, everything, was a copy of this heavenly pattern that God showed Moses on the mountain. And this heavenly pattern that God showed Moses on the mountain included as its essential element the mystery of creation. And this is what Moses wrote down in the book of Genesis. He got that vision of creation on Mount Sinai from the heavenly pattern that God showed him on the mountain. This means that the primary principle of creation, of nature, the movements of sun, moon, and stars, is not physics. It's the worship of God in spirit and in truth. This means that even the laws of nature are a copy of the heavenly pattern that God revealed to Moses on the mountain. The laws of nature, that is to say, are rooted not in physics, but in the will of God. This is why, when God wills it, nature is overruled. So when his Son is conceived by the Holy Spirit of a virgin, which is not according to the laws of nature, and when his Son is raised from the dead, which is not according to nature, this nonetheless is in no way against nature. In fact, the Holy Fathers will tell us that the only thing that is against our nature is disobedience to God, sin. Rather, the virgin birth and the resurrection of Christ reveal the fulfillment, the perfection, the deification of nature. This is what nature is all about. Creation is revealed in the law of Moses to be in its primary essence the cosmic temple in which God wishes to dwell and to appear among us. And this is the vision of the world that one sees in the belief that Jesus is risen from the dead. So understand that what Cleopas and Luke were seeing, what St. John saw, what all those who saw the risen Lord were seeing. They were seeing what Moses saw on Sinai. They were seeing what Isaiah saw in the temple when he saw the Lord high and lifted up on a pool of sapphire. They are seeing what Ezekiel saw, as he records, and especially in chapters 44 to 47. In fact, they're seeing what all the prophets saw in their visions, and that is, those who saw the risen Christ were seeing not the copy of heavenly things, but they were seeing the heavenly reality itself. That heavenly reality is the icon of God, the Lord Jesus Christ. They were seeing the reality of which the whole worship of Israel in the Old Testament, and of which the whole of creation and all the laws of nature are but the copy, the shadow. They were seeing the Lord himself in the very place where the Lord stood, at the top of the mountain, in the heart of the tomb, or in the tomb of the heart, at that point where earth opens unto heaven. But there's a deeper beauty that we must not miss. It's what's indicated in St. Thomas placing his hands into the wounds of the risen Lord's body. Now, I believe that this actually takes us to Mary Magdalene in the garden. In other words, we cannot read St. Thomas in the upper room without seeing also Mary Magdalene in the garden. And Mary Magdalene in the garden takes us to the nuptial imagery of the Song of Songs, Song of Solomon. Remember that the woman, as she is called, Mary Magdalene, is the gospel image of Eve, the woman, built from Adam, by God from Adam's rib. Mary Magdalene is therefore a theological image of Eve and of the human soul and of the church that once was barren. But now the beauty of the Virgin and her Son is made truly to be the mother of the living. Remember also that in the garden, Mary did not recognize Jesus until when? He calls her by her name. And then she wants to do exactly as St. Thomas wanted to do. That's where there's this parallel. She wants to reach out and touch him, to hold him, as a lover longs to hold her beloved bridegroom close to her, never to let him go again. Now, when the Lord invites Thomas to place his hands into the wounds of his body, I think that St. Thomas, together with Mary Magdalene, are showing us what it is to worship the Lord Jesus, and therefore what it is to come to life, to be raised from the dead, and to begin truly to exist. They both fall down in worship. St. Thomas can say, "Only my Lord and my God." And what does Mary Magdalene say? I can't remember. I think she just says, "Rabbi." Note that it does not say that Thomas actually placed his hands into Jesus' wounds. So that we have biblically an exact parallel between St. Thomas and Mary Magdalene. And it's in the Song of Songs, I believe, that we'll find the reason the Lord prevents Mary from holding him. From the Song of Songs, chapter 3, verses 1 to 4, if you want to read it. It's indicated that the reason the Lord will not let Mary hold him is because the time is past for him to go down into the tomb again, which is described as saying in the Song of Songs as the house of the bride's mother. Rather, and you can see it in his dialogue with Mary Magdalene, that the time has come, rather, for her to come forth like Lazarus, and to follow him, her kinsman, as he's called in the Song of Songs. The divine, he's called her kinsman. Why? Because he's the divine image in whom she was made. The time has come for her to follow him up to the bosom of his Father in the heavens. In these resurrection stories, we are seeing the reality that one enters when one believes in the Lord Jesus risen from the dead. It is not the visible empirical world of physics or biology, an impersonal world in which living and dying that's just what happens. It's the unseen world of the bridal chamber, the invisible inner universe of the heart, as Father Roman Braga called it. It's a world of nuptial intimacy and tenderness, where we come upon our true name, our true identity, known only by God and in God, and in which the heavenly bridegroom, out of his unfathomable love for us, calling us by our true name that he knew even before we were born, as the psalmist says, has become one with us in our death, in our brokenness, in all the traumas and wounds of our soul and body. For the Lord's wounds are the concrete epiphany of his love for us. So when he invites Thomas to place his hands into his wounds, he's inviting Thomas to lay hold of his love for us. So that by loving him, by holding him dear in our hearts, by placing the hands of our erotic love into the wounds of his body, the concrete manifestation of his erotic love for us, in doing so, we are healed. We are raised from death to life, born again from above as a new creation, as children of God, who are not of the flesh, but of the Spirit. It is in this unseen mystery of love, regenerating us in the invisible realm of the heart, not in the cold, logical demonstration of philosophy, or the empirical proofs of science, but in this unseen mystery of the bridal chamber of the heart. Here is where the soul comes to know the Lord Jesus, and suddenly to understand the Scriptures, and together with that, the hidden mystery of creation, and not only that, but to know also her own true name, that the Lord knew even before we were seen under the fig tree. How then does one place the hands of one's erotic longing into the wounds, the erotic love of the risen Lord Jesus, without seeing him? Would it not be by coming to know our true name, in which we ourselves are unseen? And how do we come to know our true name? It would be by coming out of ourselves in the self-denial of erotic love, to follow the Lord by following his commandments, by studying the writings of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms. In other words, by coming into the empty tomb, and by purifying our senses, by denying ourselves and taking up our cross to follow Jesus, and to lose our life in him, as he commands. For the Lord is present in his commandments. His cross is active in his commandments. For his commandments are centered on erotic love, which becomes active and true to itself, only as one is denying oneself and losing one's life for the sake of the beloved. This movement of erotic love is the very essence of our coming to be in God. It is the very essence of God coming to be in us, in the mystery of his incarnation, his cross, the burial, and his holy resurrection. All of these are the epiphany, the incarnation of God's own erotic love for us, in which he emptied himself and took upon himself the form, the schema, the clothing of our flesh and blood. Therefore, by striving to do as he commands, we enter our own heart, we come into our own true name, as St. John entered the empty tomb. And we place the love of our soul into the Sabbath rest of the Lord Jesus, as St. Thomas placed his hands into the wounds of the Lord's body. And when we do this, a healing begins to happen in our soul, deep within. And in the erotic love of our soul, we find ourselves beginning to live as though we are dead to this world. For we are now living in the Lord's love for us. In repentance, we enter the faith, the knowledge of his empty tomb. And in faith, in true vision, we now begin to see what I think St. John may have seen and why he may have believed when he saw the turban and the linen cloth off to the side that the Lord had taken off when he rose from the dead. I'm thinking that what St. John was seeing was that the garments of this world that the Lord once clothed himself in, he has laid aside, for they have grown old. They burst when he filled them with the new wine of his blood and water that came forth from his side on the cross. And he has clothed himself with the garments of his new creation, with new wineskins. Uniting ourselves to Christ, the old wineskins of our body begin to burst as we eat and drink the new wine of his body and blood in the breaking of bread, in the empty tomb. And in the sweetness of that bursting, we begin to live in the hope, full of joy, that when he comes again, we shall become fully like him. We shall truly know our name, for we shall see him as he is. We shall know his name. And we will enter not just into his empty tomb, but into the joy of his holy resurrection, the bridal chamber of his Sabbath rest. Amen. O sole Deo tuo salus. Glory to Jesus Christ. Christos es resurrectado. Viveros es cierto. Christos voskres. Christos anesti. Christ is risen.